Welcome to Crime Loom, where every thread we pull reveals a darker truth. Stories of mystery, secrets, and crime woven into chilling tales you won't forget. Sit back, listen carefully, and step into the shadows, because here, every secret has a story. In every street, there's always one house everyone avoids. In this story, it belongs to the grumpiest old man the neighborhood has ever known. But behind his silence and anger hides something far darker. Strange lights glow from his basement. At night, knocks echo from under the porch, and screams pierce the silence. What looks like just a bitter old man is actually a life filled with crime, secrets, and fear. Today, we uncover the secret life of the grumpiest old man. The old man was known by everyone in the neighborhood. People called him the grumpiest old man, and they were not wrong. His house was old, the paint peeling from the walls, the fence weak and crooked. He sat outside most mornings on a broken chair with a stick beside him. If children ran past his gate, he would bang the stick hard on the ground and shout at them. If anyone tried to greet him, he would turn his head away and pretend he did not hear. People avoided him because he was always angry, always frowning, always chasing away company. But behind his anger was something more, something no one could see. Everyone thought he was just an old man who hated the world, but he lived with secrets that made him the way he was. No one could guess that his life was not as simple as it looked. Across the street lived a young woman named Rita. She had moved there only a few months ago. She worked from home and liked to spend time near her window, reading or sipping tea. From her window, she could see the old man's porch. At first, she thought he was harmless, just another old man with a short temper. But as days passed, she noticed things that made her curious. The old man had a routine, and he never broke it. At 6 in the morning, he would come out with a tray and a cup of tea. He would sit there for an hour, staring at the road as if waiting for something or someone. At 9, he would lock his door and leave, not from the front gate, but through the back lane. At noon, he would return with a cloth bag that never looked light, though he carried it without effort. At night, when the whole street went dark, a strange blue glow would shine from under his porch. It was faint but clear, like light from a hidden basement. Rita started writing notes about him. At first, it was just out of boredom, but soon she realized the old man's life was not normal. She wrote down times, small actions, and strange details. She noticed that he never received visitors. He never spoke to anyone. No relatives came, no friends called. He lived as if the world outside his house did not exist, except for the strange trips he made. One Tuesday evening, she saw a delivery boy come to his house. He carried a small package. The boy rang the bell twice. The old man opened the door just a little and took the package without saying a word. He looked up for a moment, and his eyes met Rita's across the street. She felt her heart jump. His stare was sharp and cold, not just angry, but as if he was warning her not to look at him. He closed the door without signing anything. Moments later, she heard a clinking sound inside the house, like metal on metal, careful and slow. That night, the blue glow under his porch was brighter than ever. A few days later, Rita saw a man come near his fence. The man was younger, in his 30s, wearing a cap pulled low. He did not ring the bell. He crouched and slipped a folded paper through the fence, then walked away quickly without looking back. 10 minutes later, the old man opened the door, looked around, and picked up the paper with 2 fingers. He did not open it outside. He went back in. That night, the blue glow appeared earlier than usual. Curiosity was burning inside Rita. She decided to go near his house when no one was watching. She crossed the street at dusk, pretending to take a walk. She stopped near his porch, bent down, and touched the wooden steps. They were strangely cold. She leaned closer and thought she heard faint sounds from beneath, scraping, dragging, maybe even knocking. She pulled back quickly, her heart racing. Back in her room, she unfolded a small piece of paper she had found stuck under a rock near his gate. It looked like it had been left there by mistake. On it were rows of numbers and one word, Thurs. One of the numbers looked like an address. She checked on her phone and saw it was a road in another part of the city, near old warehouses. See. Next day, she followed him. She kept her distance, riding her bike slowly while he walked ahead with his cloth bag. He went straight to the warehouse area. She saw him enter one of the old buildings without knocking. She waited, hiding behind a cart. After some time, he came out with the same bag. It looked heavier, but it never swung. He walked back the same way. Rita did not follow further. She had seen enough to know he was hiding something. That night, the knocking sound under his porch returned. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more knocks. It was not random. It was a signal. Her hands shook as she wrote it down in her notes. It reminded her of Morse code, like prisoners tapping messages through walls. She thought, what if someone was trapped down there? What if the old man was keeping someone in his basement? She could not sleep that night. She stared at his house until the blue light faded. Then, just as she was about to close her eyes, the old man stepped out onto his porch. He looked around the street, then directly at her window. Their eyes met in the dark. Slowly, he raised his hand and placed a finger on his lips. A clear sign. Stay quiet. Do not tell. Rita froze, her heart pounding. He stood there for a moment, then turned back inside. The porch light went out. The street was silent again, but the silence was heavier now, filled with secrets that Rita could no longer ignore. The next morning, the street looked normal to everyone else. Children went to school, shopkeepers opened their shutters, and the tea seller shouted about his fresh brew. But to Rita, nothing was normal anymore. The image of the old man, pressing, his finger to his lips, haunted her. She could not shake the thought that he knew she was watching, and worse, that he was warning her. She tried to avoid looking outside, but every little sound made her curious. By noon, she gave in and peeked through the curtain. The old man was not on his chair. His porch was empty, and the stick rested alone against the wall. The gate was locked, and the street was silent. Rita felt a strange mix of fear and courage. She remembered the piece of paper with numbers she had found near his gate. The address written there was still fresh in her mind. It pointed to a road, near old warehouses. She could not forget the way he had gone into that warehouse and come out with his heavy bag. Something about it felt too secret, too strange. Her phone lay on the table. She dialed the number from the poster about the missing. Pendant, a woman answered. Her voice was soft and broken. Yes, the woman said. Rita hesitated but asked, that pendant, when was it stolen? 3 months ago, the woman whispered. They broke into our house but didn't take money or jewelry. Just that pendant. It belonged to my mother. Police could not find anything. We lost hope. Rita wanted to tell her about the old man, about the bag, about the strange light, but fear stopped her. What if she was wrong? What if the old man found out? She simply said, I will let you know if I hear anything, and ended the call. That night, she stayed awake, staring at his porch. At 11, the faint blue glow returned. She opened her notebook and wrote the time down. At midnight, the sound came again. Knock, 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 a pause. Knock, knock, knock. Her stomach tightened. This was not noise. This was a signal. Someone was trying to speak. Her thoughts raced. What if someone was trapped beneath his house? What if he was hiding a person, keeping them locked away in the basement? The idea made her skin crawl. The next day, she decided to follow him again. She waited until he left through the back lane with his cloth bag. She kept her bike at a distance, moving slowly so he wouldn't notice. His steps were steady, and Rita did not sleep that night. The image of the old man stepping into the hidden door under his porch played in her head again and again. The way the blue glow grew brighter after he went inside made her skin crawl. She wanted to run to the police, but what would she say? That she saw an old man go into his own basement? That lights and knocking came from beneath the porch? Without proof, they would laugh. In the morning, the street was busy again. Vendors called, children shouted, neighbors gossiped, but the house of the old man stayed silent. The chair on his porch was empty. The stick leaned against the wall like a guard that had no master. Rita kept glancing out of her window, waiting for him to appear, but he did not. At noon, she saw movement. The old man stepped out, holding his cloth bag as usual. His face was as blank and sour as ever. He locked the front door, looked around once, and left through the back lane. Rita's heart began to race. She had a chance. She hurried down the stairs and crossed the street. Standing close to his porch, she bent near the small door under the steps. The lock was strange, handmade, with thick iron teeth. She touched it, lightly. It was ice cold, colder than metal should be in the afternoon sun. She pressed her ear against the door, holding her breath. At first, silence. Then, faintly, she heard it. A scrape, a drag. And then 3 short knocks. A pause. 3 short knocks again. Her eyes widened. Someone was inside. She pulled back quickly and almost stumbled. Fear gripped her, but so did curiosity. She wanted to open the lock, to see with her own eyes. But she had no tools, no key, no courage. She turned and rushed back into her building before anyone saw her. That evening, she could not sit still. She thought about the missing pendant, about the warehouse, about the bag he always carried. She thought about the paper with numbers. And she thought about the knocks. It was not random. It was a message. Someone wanted to be heard. At 10 at night, she switched off her room light and sat by the window in the dark. The street was quiet. The old man's porch was dark, too. Then, at 11, the glow returned. Blue, faint at first, then stronger. Her hands clenched tight around her notebook. At midnight, the knocking started again. She held her phone up, recording. The sound. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. But something was different tonight. After the second round of knocks, another sound followed. A faint cry, muffled, weak, but real. Her blood turned cold. There was no doubt now. Someone was trapped in there. Her mind screamed to call the police. But her fear was stronger. What if the old man found out she had called them? What if he came after her? He already knew she was watching. Suddenly, the porch door opened. The old man stepped out. His face was darker in the dim light, his eyes sharp like knives. He did not look around this time. He walked straight to the small door under the steps, unlocked it with a key, and went inside. The glow burst out brighter than ever. Rita's heart thumped so hard she thought it might shake the glass of her window. She could not look away. She saw shadows move under the cracks of the porch, long and thin. She heard metal clinking, chains dragging, and then silence again. The glow slowly faded and the old man came out. He closed the small door, locked it, and stood there for a moment. Then, as if he had known all along, he turned his head and looked straight at her window. Rita gasped and dropped to the floor, hiding behind the wall. She covered her mouth with her hand to stop her breathing from sounding too loud. Minutes passed. Her chest burned. She dared not peek again until the street grew silent. The next day, she tried to act normal, but her mind was heavy with questions. Who was in that basement? Why were they knocking? Why was the old man hiding them? She decided to follow him again. At 9 in the morning, he left with his cloth bag. Rita rode her bike carefully behind him. This time he walked farther, past. The warehouses, to a narrow alley filled with broken walls and abandoned shops. He stopped at a rusted gate and knocked twice. The gate opened, and he slipped inside. Rita parked her bike and waited. After half an hour, he came out with the bag, but this time she saw something red stain the edge of the cloth. Her stomach turned. He walked back home slowly. Rita wanted to follow closer, to see more, but fear stopped her again. She returned home and locked her door. That night she could not stop thinking about the red stain. Was it paint? Was it blood? When the blue glow returned at 11, she was already sitting with her phone recording. At midnight, the knocking started again. Knock, 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 then silence. Then a weak cry, a cry that was cut short by a loud clang, like metal slamming shut. Her whole body shook. She knew now that the grumpiest old man on her street was living, a life of secrets darker than anyone could imagine. And she also knew one thing for sure. The secret life of that man was no longer just his own. It was now pulling her into its shadow. Then cut short by that loud clang of metal. She told herself again and again that she needed to call the police, but fear kept her frozen. She knew the old man was dangerous. She had seen his eyes, and those eyes carried no mercy. The next morning, the street looked calm as always. The milk seller shouted. The children went to school. The shopkeepers swept dust from their front steps. But Rita's eyes kept going back to the corner house. The curtains were drawn, and the chair was empty. She thought about going to the police station, but what if they came and found nothing? The old man could be warned, and then she would be in danger. She needed proof. She decided she would get closer this time. At noon, when the old man was gone, she crossed the street again. The lock on the small basement door was still there, heavy and cold. She bent close, listening. At first, only silence. Then, faintly, 3 knocks. She froze. 3 more knocks followed. Her heart leapt. Someone was still alive down there. She whispered, "I hear you," even though she knew the person could not hear her through the thick wood. She pulled back quickly and hurried home. Her hands shook as she wrote in her notebook. She began to wonder who it could be. Was it a neighbor? Someone missing from the posters she had seen? Or was it someone the world did not even know was gone? That evening, she decided to watch more, carefully. She sat in her dark room, curtains open just a little. At 11, the blue glow returned. At midnight, the knocking started again. But this time, she noticed something new. After the knocks, there was a pause, then 2 short knocks, then another pause, then 1 knock. It was not random. It was a code. Someone was trying to say something in patterns. Rita grabbed her notebook and copied it down. She did not know how to understand it, but she was sure it was a message. She tried to look it up on her phone, searching for simple codes, but nothing made sense to her tired mind. She shut the phone and stared at the porch. The old man had not come out yet. Minutes later, the front door opened. The old man stepped outside. He carried no bag this time, but his hand gripped something metallic that shone faintly in the porch light. He looked left, right, then up. Rita ducked quickly, pressing her back against the wall. She did not breathe for a long moment. When she finally peeked again, the porch was empty, the door closed, but the glow from below was stronger now, as if the basement itself was awake. The next day, she could not focus on anything. She kept staring at her notes. She needed answers. She decided to return to the warehouse area. Maybe she could find out what the old man was doing there. She rode her bike carefully, keeping her head down. The warehouses looked deserted in daylight. She went to the one he had entered before. The door was shut, but not locked. She pushed it slightly and peeked inside. It was dark, dusty, with boxes stacked high. The air smelled of rust and old paper. She stepped in slowly, her shoes crunching. on broken glass. Then she froze. At the far end, she saw a table. On it lay objects covered with cloth. She moved closer and lifted one edge. Underneath was a small collection of jewelry, rings, lockets, chains, each carefully placed as if displayed. Her breath caught. She pulled back the cloth further and saw more. Dozens of items, each one different, but all personal, all important. She remembered the woman's voice on the phone saying her mother's pendant had been stolen. This was where those missing items ended up. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and took pictures. But then a sound cut through the silence. A cough, deep, rough, and close. She turned and saw him. The old man stood at the doorway, his eyes cold, his hand gripping the cloth bag. For a moment, time froze. His face did not change. He said nothing. He only stepped forward, slow and steady. Rita's heart hammered. She turned and ran, stumbling over boxes, nearly falling. She pushed past the door and rushed to her bike. She kicked the pedal hard and sped away without looking back. She did not stop until she reached her building. She ran inside, locked the door, and collapsed onto the floor. Her phone was still in her hand. She checked the pictures. They were blurry, dark, but clear enough to show the stolen items. Proof. That night, she sat in the dark again, shaking. At 11, the glow returned. At midnight, the knocking began. But this time it was louder, more desperate. Knock, knock, knock. Then a pause, then 2 knocks, then 1. Rita realized she had heard that pattern before. It was not random. It was someone begging for help. She pressed record on her phone, capturing every sound. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow I go to the police. Tomorrow." But as she said it, her eyes moved to the porch. The front door opened again. The old man stepped out. His face could not move. The old man's finger was still pointed at her window, steady and cold. It was not just a gesture. It was a warning. It was a message that he knew she was watching, that he knew she was no longer just a neighbor, but a witness. She froze in her chair until the blue glow faded and the porch went dark. Only then did he lower his hand and step back inside. Her heart beat so hard she thought it would break her chest. She slid down to the floor, clutching her phone. She had proof now. The pictures from the warehouse, the recordings of the knocks, the glow, the strange codes. But she also had fear, heavy and choking. If she went to the police, he might find out before they could act. He had eyes sharper than knives. He would know. She told herself again and again that she would go in the morning. But when morning came, she found herself frozen. She looked out and saw him sitting on his chair as if nothing had happened. The stick was by his side, and his face wore the same bitter frown. He looked ordinary, too ordinary, as if the night before had been a dream. By noon, she forced herself to act. She dressed quickly and left the house with her phone in her pocket. But as she reached the corner, she saw him again. The old man was not on his chair anymore. He was standing near the tea stall, speaking to the vendor in his usual harsh voice. His eyes flicked to her for a moment, and she felt her legs turn weak. She turned and walked the other way, her plan broken by fear once again. That evening, she sat by her window, staring at his porch. At 11, the glow returned. At midnight, the knocking came again. This time, it was frantic. Knock, 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 pause. 2 knocks, pause. 1 knock, then again, louder each time. She pressed record, her hands shaking. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, tomorrow I go." But tomorrow brought something worse. At 10 in the morning, police cars came to the street. Neighbors gathered, whispering and pointing. Rita rushed outside to see. 2 officers were at the old man's gate. They knocked, but he did not answer. They spoke to neighbors, asking questions. Rita's heart leapt. Had someone else reported him? She thought of showing them her pictures, her notes. But before she could act, the old man stepped out. He looked calm, almost polite, as if the grumpiness was only a mask he could drop at will. He spoke to the officers quietly. They asked questions, he nodded, and after a while, they left. The neighbors shook their heads. "Routine check," one said. "Maybe about property papers." The crowd scattered. The street went back to normal, but Rita knew nothing was normal. The police had come and gone, and the old man was still there. He had survived their questions without a crack. He had looked calm, even friendly. And now she was sure of one thing: he was smarter than she thought. That night, the knocking was louder than ever. It was desperate, full of panic. She sat frozen listening, her phone recording again. The glow was strong, almost spilling onto the street. Then, suddenly, it went dark. The knocks stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. The front door opened. The old man stepped out. His face was shadowed, his eyes dark. He walked slowly to the porch steps and stood there, staring at the street. Then, without looking up at her window, he spoke for the first time in years. His voice was low, rough, but clear. "Some things," he said, "are better left in the dark." The words carried across the empty street like a knife. Rita froze. He turned, went back inside, and closed the door. The next morning, Rita sat at her table, staring at her notes. She had recordings. She had pictures. But she also had a neighbor who knew she was watching him. She thought of leaving, of moving away. But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She needed to know the truth. That afternoon, she went back to the warehouse area. She searched for the same building but found the door locked tight. No one answered when she knocked. She checked the others, but they were empty. It was as if the place had been cleaned out overnight. She returned home with nothing but fear. That night, the glow returned later than usual. Midnight passed with no knocks. 1 o'clock passed with no sound. Then, at 2 in the morning, she heard something different. Not knocks. Screams. Weak, muffled screams from under the porch. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears stinging her eyes. The screams faded into sobs, then silence. She sat frozen until dawn. When she finally dared to look out, the old man was sitting in his chair, sipping tea as if nothing had happened. His stick tapped lightly on the ground, in rhythm, like an old habit. He looked across the street, his eyes cold and sharp, and, for the first time, Rita felt that he was not just warning her anymore. He was daring her. Rita could not shake the screams from her mind. They followed her even when the sun rose. She had heard many things before, the knocks, the cries, the dragging chains, but the screams were different. They were raw, painful, full of fear. Whoever was down there was alive, but barely. And the old man sat outside the next morning as if nothing had happened, sipping his tea, the grumpy mask on his face like always. She avoided her window for most of the day. Every time she thought of looking out, she remembered his eyes. She remembered how he had spoken across the street for the first time. "Some things are better left in the dark." The words echoed in her head. She asked herself if maybe he was right. Maybe she should stop. Maybe she should move away and leave the mystery unsolved. But something inside her refused. The truth was already wrapped around her. By evening, she gathered courage again. She opened her notebook and went through all her notes. Times, dates, codes, pictures of stolen jewelry, recordings of knocks and screams. This was enough to take to the police. She only needed the strength to walk into the station. She told herself she would go tomorrow, no matter what. That night she sat in the dark again. At 11, the glow returned. At midnight, the knocks came again. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Then silence. Then one single knock, soft but heavy. She pressed record, her breath uneven. She whispered to herself, "Hold on, I'll get help." But then the glow went out suddenly. The porch was dark. The street was silent. She thought it was over, but then came the sound of footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps crossing the wooden porch. The front door creaked open. The old man stepped out. He did not look around the street this time. He looked straight at her window. Rita dropped down to the floor, hiding. She pressed her back against the wall, her phone clutched tight in her hands. She held her breath. Seconds felt like hours. She thought he would come knocking on her door. But the street stayed quiet. When she finally dared to peek, the porch was empty again. The next morning, she woke to voices outside. She looked from her window and saw a group of neighbors gathered near the tea stall. They were whispering loudly. A man pointed at the power pole. A new poster was pinned there. Another missing person. A young man this time, his picture printed in black and white. The words said, "Missing for 2 weeks. Last seen near market. Road." Rita's blood went cold. 2 weeks. Around the same time, she had first heard the knocks. She rushed downstairs, pretending to join the crowd. She looked at the poster closely. The man's face was tired but kind, his eyes soft. She remembered the faint cry she had heard that night. It matched. She felt it deep in her chest. This was the person in the basement. That night, she sat by her window again. She told herself she would not look, but her eyes kept drifting. At 11, the glow returned. At midnight, the knocks came again. 3, pause, 2, pause, 1. She pressed record again. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered into the darkness, "I know who you are. I'll try." But then something happened that she had not seen before. The basement door under the porch opened. Light spilled out. A shadow moved inside. And for a second, she saw him. Not the old man, but someone else. Thin, weak, chained at the wrists. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. He lifted his head toward her window and their eyes met. Her chest clenched. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow disappeared quickly as the old man stepped inside, blocking the light. The door shut. The glow dimmed. The street went silent again. Rita fell back from the window, her body shaking. She had seen him. She had seen the prisoner. It was not just her imagination. It was real. The next day, she avoided looking outside. She packed a small bag with her notes, her phone, her recordings. She told herself she would go to the police station, but as she opened her door, she froze. On the floor outside her apartment was an envelope. No name, no address, just plain brown paper. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper with only 4 words written in shaky black ink. "Stop, or you're next." Her breath caught. She looked around the hallway, but it was empty. Her knees weakened, and she dropped into her chair. The old man knew. He had left her a message, or maybe the prisoner had managed to send it out somehow. Either way, the meaning was clear. That night, she could not bring herself to sit at the window. She turned off her lights and sat in the corner of her room, hugging her knees. Still, she could feel the glow through the curtains. She could hear the faint knocking. It was softer this time, weaker, like the prisoner had no strength left. Each knock was slower, sadder. She covered her ears, but she could still feel it. It was not just a sound anymore. It was inside her head. Rita did not sleep at all. The envelope with those 4 words stayed on her table. "Stop, or you're next." She stared at it again and again, her hands trembling. Who had left it? The old man or the prisoner? If it was the old man, it was a threat. If it was the prisoner, it was a warning. Either way, her fear grew heavier with every hour. She thought about running away. She could leave the neighborhood, pack her things, move far from the corner house. But the thought of the prisoner held her back. His pale face, the chains, the desperate eyes, she could not forget. If she left, he might die down there, alone and voiceless. The next morning, the street was noisy again. Life carried on as if nothing dark was hidden behind that crooked fence. The old man sat on his chair with his tea, his stick tapping on the ground. Children avoided him. Neighbors ignored him. To them, he was still just a grumpy old man. But to Rita, he was a monster wearing a mask of age. She decided she could not stay silent anymore. She gathered her notes, her recordings, her photos, and put them in a folder. She dressed quickly, ready to go to the police station. Her hands shook as she locked her door. But when she reached the street, she froze. The old man was not on his porch. He was standing across the road near the tea stall, watching her. He was not pretending this time. His eyes were locked on her, steady and sharp. She turned and went back inside, her plan shattered by fear again. Her knees felt weak, her chest burned. She knew now she was trapped, just like the prisoner. That night she forced herself to sit by the window again. At 11, the glow returned. At midnight, the knocks came, weak, slow, almost fading. Knock, pause, knock, then silence. Rita pressed record again, whispering, "I hear you. I will help you." But her voice was shaky, broken. Minutes later, the front door opened. The old man stepped out, his shadow long in the blue glow. He looked around, then straight at her window. But this time he smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was thin, sharp, and full of menace. He raised his hand and tapped his stick on the ground 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Then he turned and went back inside. Her blood turned cold. He was answering the prisoner's signal. He was mocking it. The next day, Rita knew she had no choice. If she stayed silent, the prisoner would die. If she spoke, she might be the next to disappear. But she could not carry the secret anymore. She packed her folder, slipped it into her bag, and told herself she would go to the police. She stepped outside, her heart pounding. The street was quiet, too quiet. The old man's porch was empty. She hurried toward the main road, but halfway, there she heard footsteps behind her, slow, steady footsteps. She turned, and he was there. The old man, his eyes locked on her, his stick tapping lightly on the ground. Tap, tap, tap. Her breath caught. She turned and ran. She darted into a side street, her bag clutched tight. She did not stop until she reached the bus stop near the market. She jumped on the first bus, her chest burning, her eyes wide. Only when the bus pulled away did she dare to look back. The old man stood at the corner watching her, his face calm, his hand gripping the stick. At the police station, she forced herself to speak. She showed them her photos, her recordings, her notes. At first, the officer frowned, doubtful. But when she played the screams, his face changed. He nodded and called for others. They promised to check the house that night. Rita returned home, shaken but relieved. She had done it. She had told. She sat in her dark room, waiting. At 11, the glow returned. At midnight, the knocks came again, weak and desperate. She whispered, "Hold on. They are coming." Hours later, flashing lights filled the street. Police cars stopped at the corner house. Officers broke the lock and stormed. Inside, neighbors gathered, whispering and gasping. Rita watched from her window, her heart pounding. Then she saw it. The officers pulled open the small door under the porch. Light spilled out. They went down. Minutes later, they came back, carrying someone. A man, thin, pale, his wrists marked by chains. His eyes blinked in the night air, confused and broken, but alive. The crowd gasped. The police pulled out more boxes, filled with jewelry, lockets, rings, medals, all the stolen memories of families. Proof of years of crime, proof of the secret. Life the old man had tried to hide, but the old man was gone. The basement was empty of him. He had vanished. For days, the police searched. They questioned neighbors. They checked warehouses. But the grumpiest old man was never found. Some said he had escaped long before the raid. Some said he was still hiding in the city, watching from the shadows. Rita never saw him again, but sometimes, late at night, when the street was silent, she thought she could hear it. Tap, tap, tap. A stick on the ground, a warning, a memory, a shadow that never left. And though the prisoner was saved and the secrets of the basement were revealed, the story did not end. Because the darkest part of the grumpiest old man's secret life was not what he had done, but that he was still out there, unseen, unheard, waiting. You've just heard The Secret Life of the Grumpiest Old Man, a story filled with fear, mystery, and hidden crimes. But this is only one thread in the dark web of stories we uncover. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, make sure to like this video, share it with others who love true crime and mystery, and subscribe to Crime Loom. Every week, we bring you stories that reveal the darkness people hide, the secrets behind closed doors, and crimes that refuse to stay buried. Stay with us, because in Crime Loom, every secret is waiting to be told.